The parts of a cell. In this lesson, you will create a model that shows how the parts of a cell contribute to its function.
Is this statement true or false? All cells have a nucleus that acts as a command center for the cell. That is false. Some cells are called prokaryotes. These cells do not have a well-defined nucleus. Instead, they contain a structure called a nucleoid that holds genetic material, DNA. Organelles are special structures that perform functions for cells. Which organelle would you expect to find in plant cells but not in animal cells? Animals have cells that excrete waste, an organelle that allows substances to pass in and out of cells. I believe they both have that, the cell membrane or the cell wall. An organelle that carries genetic information for reproduction. An organelle that allows the organism to make food from sunlight. Well, I remember that plants make food from sunlight, so an organelle that would have that we would expect to find in plant cells but not in animal cells. Check.
Hi, I'm Jackie, and I'm an aerospace engineer. You might think that I have planets, stars, and space on my mind all day long. I do think about them a lot, but recently, I've been thinking a lot about cells, too. Yes, cells, the existence of life. After all, the only life we know of exists right here on Earth. But what about space? This year, I had an opportunity to work with cells. I was part of a team of scientists that participated in an exciting study. We sent bacteria into space to see if bacteria can grow there. We found that the colonies of bacteria grow very differently in space than they do on Earth. So what's the connection between bacteria and cells? Bacteria are single-celled organisms. Studying how these cells perform important life functions in space helps scientists explore whether it's possible for other forms of life to exist in space beyond Earth. Isn't that exciting? And you don't have to go into space to explore how cells perform life functions. In this lesson, we'll explore the different parts of a cell and learn how these parts work together to keep the cell alive. We'll also explore differences between various types of cells.
The parts of a cell. The cell is the basic unit of life. People, plants, and animals are all made up of cells. Think about the human body and its many functions, from seeing to breathing to walking. Cells work together to help the body perform all of those functions and many more. A scientific principle known as cell theory explains how the cell is the smallest functional unit of life. According to cell theory, all living things are made up of one or more cells. A single-celled organism can perform the basic functions of life. The cell also displays all the features of living things. Let's look at the different parts of a cell.
The definition of a cell: the smallest functional building block of an organism. Cell.
Identifying the parts of a cell. The human body is composed of many cells, tissues, and organs. The skin forms an external covering that protects the internal organs from damage. In the same way, every cell has a protective cover called a cell membrane. It keeps the internal structure of the cell intact. This membrane is flexible and permeable. Permeability gives the cell membrane the ability to allow water, food, and other substances to pass through the cell. It also allows waste products to leave the cell. Many cells have small parts called organelles. Doesn't organelle sound a lot like organ? Just as organs in the body, such as the heart and liver, have specific functions, organelles also have specific functions that help keep a cell alive. Organelles float freely inside a cell. A cell contains about 70% water. Most of this water is in the cytoplasm, which consists mainly of water and salt. Because of its watery structure, the cytoplasm allows the movement of organelles and other substances within and outside the cell. Let's take a closer look at the function of each organelle in a typical cell. The internal parts of a cell. Click each label to learn more about each part of a cell.
The nucleus. The nucleus is the largest organelle in a cell. It contains the cell's genetic information. The nucleus also acts as a control center, giving commands, I would highlight that, to other organelles to perform functions of the cell. The nucleus is similar to the brain, which controls body functions. Golgi apparatus, or Golgi body, appears as several stacks of flattened structures. The Golgi apparatus receives the lipids and proteins that the ER produces, or endoplasmic reticulum. We'll get to that. The Golgi body sorts and packs these nutrients before sending them to the correct destination for transportation. The nutrients are added to the structure called a vesicle. The vesicle acts as a carrier to transport the nutrients to their destination. The Golgi body is like a post office that packages and sorts items before delivering them. Vesicles act as mail trucks that deliver the lipids and proteins to their destination. This destination may be within the cell or outside of it. In addition, the Golgi body also produces lysomes. So think of this as like a factory going back and forth on the conveyor belts, and then the packages are being sent out after that. Mitochondria. Mitochondria are called the powerhouses of a cell. They are elongated structures with highly folded internal membranes. Chemical reactions that occur inside the mitochondria cause the release of energy in the cell. Cells that need more energy, such as muscle cells, contain a higher number of mitochondria. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. The absence of rhizomes on the surface of the smooth ER gives it a flat, smooth appearance. The function of the smooth ER is to produce lipids and fats for use within the cell. Our bodies get fats and lipids from the foods we eat. In the same way, cell organelles get their fats and lipids from the smooth ER. Depending on location, the smooth ER produces additional nutrients. For example, calcium is a nutrient needed for muscle contraction. So the smooth ER produces calcium in the muscle cells. It also removes toxic substances from the cells. Rough endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, is a flat tubular structure. The rough ER gets its name from its grainy appearance, which is caused by the presence of rhizomes. Rhizomes produce protein in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. So rough has the bumps, but it still goes back and forth. And the smooth does not have the bumps. Oh, notice that there is smooth attached. Sorry, I messed up. There's the smooth part and the rough part. My bad. A vacuole. The primary function of a vacuole is to store nutrients for later use. It also stores waste products so the cell is free from contamination. Lysomes. Lysomes are used for digestion in the cell. They break large molecules into smaller molecules for cell usage. Lysomes also digest foreign materials such as bacteria and food particles, which enables waste removal from the cell. Rhizome. Rhizomes are organelles that create proteins. Various body functions, such as building muscles, need and use proteins. The human body contains about 100,000 different proteins that it uses for its various functions. When someone gets a cut or a wound, a protein goes to work. The protein enables blood to clot and helps to heal the wound. It's the job of the rhizomes to produce these proteins.
Modeling cells. We can't see a cell with the naked eye, but we know the internal parts of a cell because scientists have used advanced instruments to study their internal structure. Scientists have shared their findings through models, which are representations of particular ideas or concepts. Models allow scientists to easily explain a concept, structure, or procedure. Models can be larger or smaller than the actual objects they represent. For example, plant and animal cells are tiny, but their models are large. On the other hand, a model of Earth, such as a globe, is much smaller than the actual Earth. But by using the globe, people can learn where countries and cities are located. Using models, scientists can also make predictions. For example, scientists can use models to predict how a bacterial infection will affect various organs in the body. Types of models. Scientists use different models for different purposes. Here are a few examples. Physical model. Physical models are physical representations of actual objects. For example, a three-dimensional or 3D model of a heart can show how the heart pumps blood. Conceptual model. Conceptual models are usually graphical representations that describe an event or a process. They explain the sequence of events in a particular process. For example, a conceptual model can show how plants make food in the presence of sunlight. Mathematical model. A mathematical model uses graphs or equations to explain mathematical concepts. For example, graphs and charts can explain the increase in crop yield after applying fertilizer. Models can be used to explain concepts. However, models have limitations. Scientists create models based on certain assumptions, so a model may not be able to explain an entire system. It may show only a small part of the system. For example, a model that shows the digestion of nutrients inside a cell may show only those organelles that are involved in the digestion process. Again, scientists may need to update or recreate models when new information is available. For example, scientists discovered organelles inside a cell one at a time. These discoveries occurred this way because scientists couldn't view tiny organelles through early microscopes. As microscopes advanced, scientists discovered more organelles, so they updated the cell model over time. Types of cells. Most cells have common characteristics. For example, all cells have a nucleus that controls the cell's activities. However, some internal parts vary from one cell to another. Let's look at some of the major types of cells. Animal and plant cells. Most organelles in an animal cell are also present in a plant cell. However, there are a few differences between the two. Watch the video on the next screen to explore these differences.
You know that plants and animals are very different. Many plants grow green leaves, which help plants make their own energy through photosynthesis. Animals, however, need to consume energy by eating plants or other animals. Although plants and animals have differences, they do share some similarities. Both are alive and both are made up of cells. On the left is an animal cell, and on the right is a plant cell. Both plant and animal cells have mitochondria, ribosomes, nuclei, endoplasmic reticula, Golgi apparatuses, and cell membranes. However, plant cells have chloroplasts, a large central vacuole, and a cell wall. Animal cells also have vacuoles, but plant cells have much larger vacuoles. These vacuoles allow plants to store water, which helps give plants structure. When water is plentiful, plants stand tall and strong. When water is scarce, plant cells shrink, making plants look withered or sickly. Animals have skeletons or exoskeletons that hold up their bodies when they move, so their cells don't need cell walls. Plants don't have skeletons, so they rely on rigid cell walls to help them hold their shape. Finally, the chloroplasts in plant cells contain chlorophyll, a pigment that gives plants their green color. Chlorophyll reacts with sunlight to create simple sugars and provide food for plant cells. The ability to draw energy from sunlight is the primary difference between plants and animals. Animals need to eat food to gain energy, while plants can get all the energy they need from the sun. It's true that there are many differences between plants and animals, but there's one similarity that remains true for all living things. We're all made up of tiny, microscopic building blocks called cells.
The diagram shows a model of an animal cell. Explain how you'd modify the model to show the structures of a plant cell. So you have some very common things, but there are different things for a plant cell. So to answer this, to show the structures of a plant cell, add a cell wall around the membrane and increase the size of the vacuole inside the cell. Draw green ovals to represent chloroplasts.
Prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Even though a single cell is tiny, it performs many complex functions using different organelles. There are two types of cells, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. Most prokaryotic life forms cannot be seen with the human eye, but current research indicates that they far outnumber eukaryotic life forms. The word karyon comes from a Greek word that means grain or seed. As scientists use it, this word means nucleus, which is the command center of a cell. A prokaryote is an organism with a simple cell. A simple cell doesn't have a distinct nucleus. Prokaryotic means before nucleus. For example, bacteria are prokaryotes. Because these cells don't have a distinct nucleus, the genetic material, DNA, is present in a structure called a nucleoid. Most prokaryotes don't have any organelles. However, they do have a cell membrane and cytoplasm. Some prokaryotic cells also show the presence of a cell wall. Bacteria perform all the functions of life, such as eating and reproducing, using this simple cell structure.
Inner membrane, cell wall, outer membrane, nucleoid DNA, and cytoplasm. Drag each label to the correct location. Sort the cell features based on the type of organism they describe. Plant cells have chloroplasts. Plant cells always have a cell wall. Animal cells never have a cell wall. They don't have chloroplasts, and they don't have a cell wall. Okay, bacteria are prokaryotic, sometimes have a cell wall, and have a nucleoid.
Science in the News: Healing Pain with Cells. So far, we've examined cells and the functions of organelles inside cells. However, cells don't live in isolation from each other. They come together to form larger body structures such as tissues and organs. Sometimes an injury or a disease can cause cell damage. If the cell happens to be a nerve cell, it can cause a person to feel pain. Scientists have recently discovered that injecting cells from bone marrow into the spinal cord can relieve nerve pain. Bone marrow is a spongy material found in bones.
And sometimes you can go to restaurants, thinking about our culinary class, where you get bone marrow broth or bone marrow butter. It's really rich in flavor and like good stuff, I guess. Healing damaged nerves with cells, you can do that. Activity. Summary.
Rocket scientists are always looking for new ways to explore space. One day, we hope to find the existence of life outside of Earth. That's why it's so important for us to understand cells, which are the building blocks of life. Cells range from simple to complex, but all cells perform basic functions for survival. Prokaryotic cells, such as the bacteria we sent into space, are simple cells. They don't have a full nucleus, but they do have genetic material in the nucleoid. On the other hand, plant and animal cells are complex cells. They contain different organelles, which work together to keep the cell alive. It's amazing how a tiny form of life can do so many things. What's more amazing is that our bodies consist of thousands of such cells that work together to perform complex functions. And who knows, maybe one day we'll say the same thing if we find life somewhere else in space. Do you think it'll happen? We don't know for sure, but until then, we'll keep investigating.
Congratulations, you've completed the tutorial, The Parts of the Cell. So, in doing the guided notes in the past, it's been somewhat difficult to show you the lesson and the notes. So, as you filled out the notes as you went along, or if you go back and look for the notes, the glossary shows the following terms: the cell, the smallest functional building block of an organism; the cell membrane, a thin barrier that forms the boundary of the cells; permeable means ability to let liquids or gases pass through; organelles, a specialized structure inside a cell; cytoplasm, a mixture of water and salt that suspends the organelles within the cell; nucleus, the largest organelle in the cell, which contains genetic information and controls cell function; eukaryotic describes unicellular or multicellular organisms that have cells with a defined nucleus; prokaryotic describes unicellular organisms that lack a nucleus. A cell wall is the outermost layer of a cell in plants and some microorganisms. The objective in this lesson, you were to create a model that shows how the parts of a cell contribute to its function. The parts of a cell. The cell is the basic unit of life. People, plants, and animals are all made up of cells. A scientific principle known as cell theory explains how the cell is the smallest functional unit of life. All living things are made up of one or more cells. A single-celled organism can perform the basic functions of life. Identifying the parts of a cell. Cell membrane. It's the protective cover. It keeps the internal structure of the cell intact. It's flexible and permeable, which allows water, food, and waste to pass through the cell. Organelles. Organelles have specific functions. They float freely inside a cell. Cytoplasm consists mainly of water and salt. It allows the movement of organelles. The internal parts of a cell. You have the nucleus, the Golgi apparatus, the mitochondrion, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, a vacuole, lysome, and rhizome. Nucleus. It gives commands to other organelles to perform various functions. The Golgi apparatus appears as several stacks of flattened structures. It receives the lipids and proteins that the ER produces. It sorts and packs these nutrients, then sends them out to the correct destination. Vesicle acts as a carrier to transport the nutrients to their destination. Mitochondrion is the powerhouse of the cell, elongated structures with highly folded internal membranes. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is a flat tubular structure. It gets its name from the grainy parts on the cell, the rhizomes. I think that's what it was on the edge of the cells. I'd have to check that in the lesson. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum is flat, smooth appearance, produces lipids and fats for use within the cell. It removes toxic substances from the cell. Ribosomes create proteins for various body functions, such as building muscles. A vacuole. Primary function is to store nutrients for later use. Also stores waste products so the cell is free from contamination. Lysome is used for digestion, breaks large molecules into smaller molecules for cell usage. Digest foreign materials such as bacteria and food particles. Modeling cells. Models allow scientists to easily explain a concept, structure, and procedure. Can be larger or smaller than the actual objects they represent. Using models, scientists can also make predictions. The types of models. You have physical representations of actual objects in a physical model. Conceptual model uses graphical representations that describe an event or process used to explain the sequence of events in a particular process. Mathematical model uses graphs or equations to explain mathematical concepts. Example, graphs and charts can explain the increase in crop yield after applying a fertilizer. Models have limitations. Scientists create models based on certain assumptions. A model may not be able to explain an entire system. It may show only a part of the system. Scientists may need to update or recreate models when new information is available. So types of cells. Most cells have common characteristics. However, some internal parts vary from one cell to another. We had to watch a video and it describes animal cells, both animals and plants plant cells. So we've got these different parts. Add a cell wall. Oh, this is how would you make this into this animal cell into a plant cell. So add a cell wall around the membrane and increase the size of the vacuole. Draw green ovals to represent chloroplasts. Prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic have a distinct nucleus. The word karyon comes from the Greek word that means grain or seed. Prokaryotic, an organism that with a simple cell doesn't have to have a distinct nucleus, it does not have a distinct nucleus. Prokaryotic means before nucleus. Example, bacteria. Most don't have organelles. They have cell membrane and cytoplasm. Some have a cell wall. Science in the news and your summary. What characteristics help you determine whether a cell is an animal, plant, eukaryotic, or prokaryotic? You might need to be able to answer that question on the test. And I believe that is all. Good luck and have a wonderful test.